Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're diving into a story that might just stick with you longer than you expect. Imagine this: your only son is getting married, and you're dressed in your finest, holding back tears of joy. But when you arrive at the venue, you discover your name isn't even on the seating chart. No mistake, no oversight, just a deliberate absence. You might survive heartbreak. You might even survive betrayal. But the humiliation of being told, without words, that you're not welcome, that's a wound most people don't come back from. So before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you left a comment with your city and local time. Let's see just how far this story reaches tonight. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan hum in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey together. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked into the venue and couldn't find my name on the seating chart. The elegant calligraphy on that oversized mirror seemed to mock me as I traced the letters slowly, scanning each name like a detective searching for a clue. Henderson, Hopkins, Jackson, but no Mitchell. No Rhonda, no me. I cleared my throat and approached a young woman holding a clipboard. Her smile was polished, professional until I said my name. I'm Rhonda Mitchell, mother of the groom. I can't seem to find my table. Her smile faltered. Let me check with the bride about that. She scurried away like a rabbit chased by a fox, leaving me standing there in my carefully altered navy dress, the same one I'd selected 3 months ago, hung on my closet door like a promise. I'd been so proud when I found it, elegant but understated, something a mother could wear to her son's wedding without drawing too much attention. Instead, I was already a problem to solve. When the clipboard girl returned, she had Indy in tow, Indy the bride, radiant in white, with an updo that probably cost more than my rent. She moved like someone born into the spotlight, and I was just part of the audience, if that. Oh, Rhonda, she said sweetly. Too sweet. The kind of sweetness you know hides something sour. So sorry for the confusion. We had to make some last-minute changes to the seating. My stomach sank, but I smiled. Of course, dear. Where would you like me to sit? Her smile stretched wider, predatory, almost. Follow me. I'll show you to your special spot. Special spot. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a trap disguised in chiffon and floral arrangements. We walked through the reception hall, past tables adorned with roses and crystal, past Indy's relatives laughing with wine glasses in hand. I saw where her family sat. I saw where the college friends sat, but I didn't see any chairs with my name. And we just kept walking. Where exactly are we going? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Oh, just a bit further, Indy said, her heels clicking with purpose. I wanted to make sure you had a perfect view of everything. We rounded a corner, away from the music and laughter, and stopped. I blinked. Once, twice. There it was, a single folding chair beside a silver garbage can, half hidden behind a giant potted ficus. I stared at it as if my eyes had misunderstood. I don't understand, I whispered. Indy giggled, light and airy. It's your seat, right next to the trash. Isn't it perfect? It's a joke. Rhonda, don't be so dramatic. My blood turned cold. A joke, that's what they were calling it. She crossed her arms and tilted her head. Besides, it's fitting, don't you think? I felt a flush rise in my cheeks, but I stood frozen. Does Damon know about this? I managed. Her eyes gleamed. He helped plan it. And like she'd summoned him, my son appeared looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, exactly like the little boy I'd once taught to tie his shoes. Mum, he said, grinning, Indy show you your seat. Pretty funny, right? The world shifted. I saw his face. His eyes I used to know, eyes that looked at me now like I was a guest, not his mother. Damon, I said, careful and slow. This isn't appropriate. He chuckled. Don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke. You're always so serious. People started noticing us. I saw someone point. Laughter. Whispers. See, Indy called out to no one and everyone. She can't even take a joke. No wonder Damon needed space from all that negativity. More laughter. I sat on that cold folding chair beside the trash can because I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me run. The metal dug into my spine. The trash smelled faintly of cocktail shrimp and discarded napkins. But I didn't move. Because as I sat, the sting in my chest began to melt into something else. Not sadness. Resolve. Something was off, and I was going to find out what. From my little corner by the ficus, I watched the wedding unfold like I was a ghost at my own son's celebration. Laughter floated in waves across the hall. Crystal glasses clinked. Someone's cousin belted out a pitchy rendition of At Last. And there I was, next to an actual garbage can. Ironic. Right in a room full of roses, satin, and overpriced entrees. I was the only thing considered disposable. But the longer I sat there, the clearer everything became. Indy wasn't careless. She was calculated. The joke wasn't some misfired attempt at humour. It was a warning, a message, wrapped in lace and served on gold-trimmed china. You don't belong here. And unfortunately, she might have been right. As the champagne flowed, I noticed something unsettling little Marcus, just 9 months old, the ring bearer with the gummy smile and round cheeks. I loved that boy. I really did. But the more I stared, the more confused I felt. Marcus had dark brown eyes, not soft hazel or blue like Damon, not emerald like Indy, deep set, serious, almost stern little eyes for such a happy baby, and the jawline angular, sharp. That wasn't Damon's nose, that wasn't Indy's chin, and the baby's ears tipped slightly like little peaks. No one in our family had ears like that. I mean, I'm no geneticist, but I had read somewhere in Psychology Today that eye colour is a dominant trait, not just some decorative accident, and babies tend to resemble their parents more than strangers at the farmer's market. I chewed that thought the rest of the reception. Like gristle stuck in my teeth, the memories started reeling themselves out, clues I'd ignored. That night, Indy first came to dinner. The way she'd smiled when Damon introduced her, all sugary charm and controlling energy. How she'd commented, "Some people just don't know when to let go." When I'd mentioned Damon's childhood scrapbook, a tiny jab, one I'd dismissed. Then came the pregnancy fast, suspiciously fast. Marcus had arrived prematurely, or so they said, but he was 8 pounds and change, healthy as a prize-winning melon. At the time, I'd chalked it up to Indy being one of those miracle mothers. But now my gut churned with doubt. Oh, and there was that time I'd shown up at their apartment unannounced. I'd brought over some misdelivered mail, okay, and maybe I'd hoped to squeeze in a quick cuddle with Marcus. But I'd heard Indy through the door before she opened it, her voice tight and angry. "I told you to stop calling. It's over. I'm married now. I have a life." When she opened the door, she looked startled. Her face was flushed. "Just a telemarketer," she said too quickly, grabbing the envelope from my hand like it was radioactive. "You know, I once read that liars blink faster when they're cornered." Indy blinked 10 times in 12 seconds. And then, as if fate wanted to underline the point, I remembered something a nurse had said after Marcus was born. I was cradling him in the hospital room, still flushed with joy, when the nurse smiled and said, "He's got very distinctive features. This one knows who he is already." At the time, I took it as a compliment, but now it read like a red flag embroidered with crimson thread. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. That's how families fall apart on the weight of assumptions. So I told myself I'd do what I always do, gather data. I was a librarian, after all. My job had always been to find the facts, not assume the endings. But one fact stared me down from the other side of that folding chair. Something about Marcus didn't add up. And Indy, she was too slick, too polished, too perfect at turning everyone's eyes away from the inconsistencies. Now, here's where you might think I started calling lawyers or shouting in the middle of the wedding. Nope, I just sat there, sipping flat soda, my legs crossed at the ankle like I was royalty and not next to the janitor's station. A younger woman, maybe Indy's friend, walked past me and whispered, "Is that the mother-in-law?" Then giggled. I didn't flinch. I smiled, nodded once, and replied under my breath, "The one with the good memory, sweetheart. You'll want to remember that." Petty, maybe, but we all need something to stay sane. By the end of the night, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to storm out or confront Damon during their slow dance. I wasn't even going to ask for a different chair. No. I was going to take notes, document things, observe. There was a mystery buried beneath Indy's expensive foundation and baby-soft lies, and I intended to uncover it. And so, when I returned home later that night, still in my navy dress and blistered heels, I poured myself a glass of warm white wine, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my old notepad. I titled the top page, Marcus Timeline, Observations and Inconsistencies. Underneath, I wrote, First date 11 months ago. My birthday, Damon brought her uninvited. Engagement within 6 weeks. Pregnancy announcement 1 month later. Birth 7 months from meeting. Claimed premature, but healthy weight. Unusual features eyes, jawline, ears. Indy's hostile reaction to basic questions. Then I underlined the last entry 3 times. Something wasn't right. And I was done being the dramatic mother-in-law who couldn't take a joke. If they wanted to treat me like garbage, maybe it was time they realised what kind of gold was hiding beneath that trash can. 3 days after the wedding, I found myself sitting in my small kitchen, staring at the yellow pages like it was some ancient oracle. My reading glasses fogged slightly from the steam rising off my lukewarm tea, but I barely noticed. My hand hovered above the listing private investigators licensed. I know what you're thinking. Who even uses the yellow pages anymore? But there's something comforting about paper. No cookies tracking you, no autofill ads, no judgment, just names, numbers, and possibilities. I made 3 calls that morning. The first guy sounded like he worked out of a van and specialised in cheating spouses and missing cats. Pass. The second woman, well, the moment I said I wanted to investigate my daughter-in-law, she hung up. No goodbye, just click, apparently. Sniffing out infidelity is okay unless it's inside a wedding ring you paid to polish. Then came Margaret Chen. Former police detective, calm voice, no nonsense. When I mentioned paternity suspicions, she didn't flinch. Instead, she asked, "Do you have reason to believe your grandson might not be biologically related to your son?" I paused, then answered honestly, I don't know, but my gut hasn't been wrong yet, and I'm tired of being treated like the crazy one. She didn't try to soothe me, Didn't promise revenge or justice or catharsis. She just said, "Come in tomorrow. Bring anything you think might help." Her office was sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop, and the sign on the window read simply, "Chen Investigations Discreet, Direct, Determined." Margaret herself was petite, maybe mid-50s, with soft silver hair pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail and the sharp eyes of someone who's seen too much to pretend otherwise. Her handshake was firm, her office was tidy, save for a single dying spider plant on the windowsill. I liked her immediately. She listened without interruption as I explained everything: Indy's pregnancy timeline, Marcus's birth weight, the nurse's strange comment, the overheard phone call, and of course, the garbage can seating arrangement. When I finished, she nodded once and said, "Let's start by looking into your daughter-in-law's past. If there's something to find, that's where we'll find it." And that's how I ended up staring at my cell phone for the next week, checking for updates the way some people check dating apps. I went about my life like normal. Morning shifts at the library. Book club on Thursdays we were reading Where the Crawdads Sing. Again, because Cheryl insists, I baked a pie I didn't eat. I went for walks and thought about babies with unfamiliar eyes and women who build empires on secrets. Then, one Thursday evening, Margaret called. "Rhonda, it's Margaret. I've found something. Can you come in tomorrow?" I couldn't sleep that night. My dreams were thick with shadows, tiny shoes with no owner, laughing wedding guests with blurred faces, a trash can that spoke my name in Indy's voice. At Margaret's office the next day, she had a manila folder waiting for me. "Your daughter-in-law," she began, "wasn't completely honest about her life before your son." I arched an eyebrow. That doesn't exactly narrow it down. "She told Damon she'd worked as a marketing coordinator in Portland and moved here for a new opportunity. That part is true, sort of, but it's what she left out that matters." She slid a photo across the desk, a candid shot of Indy, laughing at an outdoor barbecue, arm wrapped around a tall man with olive skin, dark eyes, and a jawline sharp enough to cut marble. "That's Connor Walsh, software developer, based in Portland. They lived together for about 8 months. According to friends, the relationship was serious." I stared at the man. He had Marcus's eyes, his smile, even the faint dimple in the left cheek. "When did she leave Portland?" I asked, my voice already tight. "About 6 weeks before she met your son. Broke her lease suddenly. Told her landlord she had a job lined up in California, but never left forwarding information. Connor says she was pregnant when she disappeared." The floor fell out beneath me. "She was pregnant. With Marcus," I whispered. Margaret nodded. "Connor doesn't know for sure, but the timeline fits. He's been trying to find her ever since." I felt sick. The kind of sick that crawls into your bones and settles there like mould. "She ran," I murmured. "She ran from him, found Damon, and let him believe convinced him that the baby was his." Margaret placed a gentle hand on mine. "We can confirm it. All we need is a DNA sample from the baby and your son. We'll compare." "How do I get it?" I asked. "They barely let me near him anymore." "Pacifier, bottle, spoon, anything he's mouthed. As for Damon's DNA, that'll be harder unless he agrees." I sat in silence for a moment, my head spinning. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was probability. It was history repeating itself. Except this time, I wasn't going to play the fool. "I can get the baby's DNA," I said finally. "Just tell me what to do." Margaret slid a small plastic evidence bag across the desk. "Slip the item in here. Make sure you don't touch the part that's been in contact with the baby's mouth. Wear gloves if you can." As I walked out of her office, the bag secure in my purse. My heart pounded with something I hadn't felt in years, not anger, not fear. Purpose? I may have been the woman next to the garbage can at my son's wedding. But now, I was the mother who refused to be discarded. Sunday arrived with a strange calm in the air, the kind you feel just before a summer storm or just before everything changes. That morning, I woke early, made my usual coffee, and stared out the kitchen window while the toast burned in the background. I wasn't hungry anyway. At exactly 10:12 a.m., my phone buzzed, a text from Damon. "Hey, Mum, Indy thought it might be nice to have you over for dinner tonight. Just a small get-together. 600. A dinner invitation from Indy. I read it 3 times. Of course, my first thought was trap. My second thought opportunity. I texted back, "Sure, what can I bring?" Damon responded almost instantly. "Maybe those dinner rolls with the herbs, they were always my favourite." So there it was. An opening, a chance to get close to Marcus without setting off Indy's defences. I just had to play the role the warm, forgiving mother-in-law who still baked from scratch even after being seated next to trash cans at milestone family events. I spent the afternoon kneading dough, not out of domestic devotion, but with surgical focus. Indy might have thought she'd pushed me aside for good, but now I had leverage she couldn't see coming. What she didn't know was that I already knew about Connor. What she didn't know was that I had a DNA bag in my purse and a plan in my head. At 5:58 p.m, I stood at Damon and Indy's door, holding a basket lined with linen and warm rolls. I wore a soft green sweater I knew brought out the hazel in my eyes, gentle, unthreatening, grandma chic. Indy opened the door. She was wearing yoga pants and a fitted top. Her blonde hair pulled into one of those perfect messy buns that never actually look messy. "Rhonda," she said, smiling. "Come in. Smells amazing. Are those the famous rolls?" I nodded, returning her smile with one of my own, fresh from the oven. The apartment was spotless, as always, neutral tones, designer touches, not a cushion out of place. It looked like something out of a catalogue. Beautiful, but sterile. The kind of home where everything is performative, where dinner was probably prepped for Instagram. Marcus was in his high chair, slapping a colourful spoon against the tray. He looked up when I entered and offered a wide, 2-tooth grin. "Hi there, sweetheart." I cooed, my voice gentle. I stepped toward him slowly, as if approaching a skittish kitten. "Look how big you've gotten." "He's been a bit fussy," Indy said, turning back to the kitchen. "But dinner should be ready in 20. Damon's just getting changed." "Can I help?" I asked, settling the breadbasket on the counter. "You can keep Marcus company," she said. "Honestly, he lights up when he sees you." Did he, or was that my guilty heart hoping? I took a seat next to the high chair, letting Marcus tug my fingers and babble incoherently about something deeply important, no doubt involving mashed peas. His spoon was blue plastic, clutched tightly in his fist, now slick with saliva and pureed carrots. I watched closely as he fed himself, smearing more on his face than into his mouth. I glanced around to make sure no one was looking. Indy had turned her back to stir something at the stove. Damon's voice drifted in from the bedroom muffled singing, probably changing into something marginally fancier than a t-shirt. It was now or never. I leaned forward. "Here, sweet pea, let Grandma help you with that." Marcus giggled as I gently took the spoon, guiding it toward his mouth, getting enough coverage to make it a forensic buffet. Then, as casually as I could manage, I rose from my chair, walked to the sink, rinsed the spoon and made the switch. The clean spoon went into the dish rack, the original, still damp with baby drool, slipped into the evidence bag I'd hidden inside the inner pocket of my purse. 30 seconds, no drama, mission complete. By the time Damon entered the kitchen, wearing a navy button-down and that familiar sheepish smile, I was wiping mashed carrots from Marcus's cheek with a damp paper towel. "Thanks for coming tonight, Mum," he said, planting a quick kiss on my forehead. "I know things have been weird." I didn't correct him. It's good to be here. Dinner was oddly pleasant. Indy was, dare I say it, charming. She asked about my work at the library, complimented the bread, even laughed genuinely at one of Damon's dad jokes. It felt almost normal, like a scene from a life I used to have. The one before garbage chairs and whispered insults and double lives. But underneath it all, I could sense something brittle, something too polished. Indy was trying too hard to project a version of herself that didn't exist, and maybe Damon didn't see it, but I did. After dessert, while Indy cleared the plates, Damon leaned against the counter beside me. "She's really trying, Mum," he said quietly. "I know things got off to a rough start." "I can see that," I replied, keeping my tone even. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that had followed him from childhood. "You think we'll ever all be close again?" I looked at him, really looked at him, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised on my own after his father disappeared with a receptionist and a joint checking account. "I think the truth has a funny way of clearing a path," I said, "even when it hurts." He blinked, surprised. "That's kind of ominous." I smiled and patted his hand. Just old lady wisdom, comes free with the bread. As I left that evening, Indy handed me a Tupperware container filled with leftover lasagna. "For lunch tomorrow," she said. I thanked her, even managed a smile. But as I walked to my car, my purse weighing heavy with truth, I whispered under my breath, "This lunch might just change everything." I met Margaret the very next morning, outside a quiet lab tucked between a florist and a dental clinic, the kind of place no one notices unless they're desperate for answers. I was, "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," said the technician at the front desk, a cheerful woman named Lisa with horn-rimmed glasses and a voice that could probably soothe infants and anxious patients alike. "We'll just need to process the sample and compare it to the biological profile we have on file." Margaret had arranged everything ahead of time. She handed over the evidence bag, the one that held Marcus's blue spoon, and gave me a subtle nod, like we were part of a quiet rebellion. "How long does it take?" I asked. 3 to 5 business days, Lisa replied, already labelling the sample. 3 to 5 days. It felt like both forever and not nearly enough time. We left the lab and walked to a nearby cafe. Margaret sipped black coffee like it was an antidote to the world. "You did well," she said, setting her cup down. "Getting the sample discreetly is the hard part. The rest is just waiting." "I hate waiting," I muttered. "My thoughts get too loud." "That's why people avoid the truth," she said, like she was reading my mind. It's rarely silent. That week, everything felt louder. My co-workers' chatter at the library, the beep of the microwave, the whisper of pages turning. Even Cheryl's voice during book club grated on me, and she's usually the soothing type with a scarf for every emotion. I kept picturing Marcus, the weight of his tiny hand, his smile, and Damon, my boy, laughing beside Indy, oblivious to how close he was to falling through the floor of his life. By Thursday, I was barely sleeping. Every night, I laid in bed and imagined different versions of the outcome, some where I was wrong and had to eat crow for months, others where I was right, but everything shattered anyway. And then Friday came. Margaret's number lit up my phone at 2:47 p.m. Rhonda, she said, her voice calm but heavy. The results are in. Can you come in? I drove like I was underwater. The traffic lights blinked in slow motion. The world muffled, like it knew something was about to come undone. Margaret was waiting in her office, the manila envelope sitting on her desk like a bomb. Before I show you this, she said, know that you did this out of love. Seeking truth is never wrong. I nodded, even as my hands trembled. She opened the envelope and handed me a single page. No biological match. That's what it said. Plain, cold, scientific. Marcus was not Damon's son. Everything inside me dropped like a floorboard collapsing. I sank into the chair and covered my mouth. I knew. I whispered. I knew. But I hoped I was just bitter, just overreacting. Margaret gave me a moment. She always knew when silence was the most compassionate response. Finally, I said, so now what? That depends on what you want. You can tell Damon privately. Give Indy a chance to confess. Or, she paused, you could reveal it publicly. I looked out the window at the grey sky. She humiliated me, I said, laughed at me in front of everyone, made me feel like garbage, literally. And my son, he stood there and let her. I touched the edge of the test paper. He deserves to know, whether she tells him or I do. I agree, Margaret said, but there's more. My eyes snapped back to hers. Connor Walsh, she continued. I found him. My breath caught. He's in Portland. He confirmed he and Indy were serious, lived together. He said she left without a word, but she was pregnant when she did. Does he know Marcus exists? Not exactly, but he suspected. He's been trying to find her. He still has a photo of them together, says it's the only picture he has of what he lost. She slid the photo toward me. Connor looked kind, strong, and heartbreakingly familiar. The same dark eyes, the same crooked smile that Marcus flashed when he was proud of something. The resemblance was undeniable. He deserves to know, I said. Yes, and so does Damon. It was like a chessboard suddenly lit up in my mind. The wedding, the garbage can, the spoon, the DNA, Connor. All of it was moving toward this one checkmate. I stood, folding the test paper and slipping it into my purse. I'm going to tell Damon. Margaret's eyes held mine. I don't know yet, but it won't be in whispers, and it definitely won't be a joke. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh notepad. I opened to a blank page and wrote 3 words. Tell the truth. Underneath, I wrote, Damon deserves facts, not fiction. Indy chose her audience when she humiliated me. So will I. Connor must be contacted. Marcus has a right to know. Then I made tea, turned off the lights, and stared at the ceiling for hours. Sometimes truth is quiet, a whisper in the dark. But sometimes truth walks into the middle of the party, clears its throat, and speaks with a megaphone. I was ready for both. The following Thursday evening, just as I was finishing up at the library, my phone buzzed again this time with a voice I hadn't expected to hear so soon. Rhonda Indy's tone was syrupy and upbeat, the kind of artificially sweet voice people use when trying to sell you a timeshare or forgiveness. I had an idea. I stayed silent, letting her fill the air. We're thinking of having a little party this weekend. Nothing fancy, just a small get-together to celebrate Marcus's first steps. He's been taking a few here and there and, well, we thought it'd be cute to have the whole family together. The irony was thick enough to slice and serve. Oh, I managed. Yes, my parents will be in town. And Melody's flying in. We thought it would be great to have everyone meet properly, to reset things. To reset, like I was a cable modem that just needed a fresh boot. Sounds lovely, I said, my voice calm. Great Saturday at 2 p.m. Oh, and those rolls, the ones with the rosemary and sea salt. My dad loved them. Of course he did. As I hung up, my heart didn't pound. It didn't flutter. It just settled. That call wasn't a reconciliation. It was a presentation. Indy wanted to parade her picture-perfect life in front of her family, and I was her prop. She had no idea I was walking in with the truth in my purse and a plan in my head. By Saturday afternoon, the weather matched the mood, grey and moody with low clouds threatening rain. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. The guest list was already sipping wine and nibbling brie in the living room. Indy greeted me with air kisses. There she is. Damon waved from across the room, holding Marcus, who was currently gumming a plush giraffe. Rhonda, this is my mum, Patricia, and my dad, Richard, Indy said, pulling me forward. And of course, you remember Melody. They were all charm and crisp linen. Patricia wore a string of pearls like she'd been born with it, and Richard had the permanent tan of someone who considered golf a personality trait. We've heard so much about you, Patricia said, her voice clipped and elegant. I smiled. Hopefully some of it was even true. The crowd chuckled politely. The next hour passed in a haze of curated conversation. I smiled at Richard's terrible stock market jokes. I complimented Melody's perfume. I accepted a second glass of wine I didn't want. But my eyes were always on Damon and Marcus. Damon looked relaxed, joyful. He was showing off his son, his not son, with the kind of pride that made my chest tighten. And Marcus, that sweet boy, was pulling himself up on coffee tables and teetering a few brave steps before flopping onto his bottom with a delighted squeal. Look at him go, someone cheered. We all clapped like trained seals. I even whistled. But inside, I was unravelling. Because no one else seemed to see what I saw, the little brown-eyed truth toddling around the room in footy pyjamas. Then, right after lunch, Indy called for everyone's attention. Let's all move into the living room. Marcus is ready to show off for the camera. We gathered in a circle around him. Damon knelt on one side of the room, arms outstretched. Marcus stood near the ottoman, wobbling. Come to Daddy, Damon called. Marcus let go and toddled 6 glorious, unsteady steps before collapsing into Damon's lap. The room exploded in cheers and applause. First steps, Indy squealed, swiping her phone to capture the moment. I wish we could freeze this forever. I took a breath and stood. Actually, I said, my voice carrying through the noise, this feels like the perfect moment to say something. The room fell silent. Damon looked up, surprised. Indy froze, her phone still in her hand. Rhonda, she said, a warning buried in the lilt. I want to share something with the family, I said calmly. Something Damon needs to know. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope, the one with the DNA results and the photo of Connor Walsh. This, I said, holding it in both hands, is the truth. Indy's smile slipped completely. What is that? Damon asked, standing slowly. I turned to him. 2 weeks ago, I had Marcus's DNA tested. You could have heard a pin drop. Even Marcus had gone silent, resting against Damon's shoulder. What Damon asked, stunned. Why would you? Because things didn't add up, I said, my voice shaking just enough to be real. The timing, the features, the silence. I had to know. Indy rushed forward. That is insane. You violated our family's privacy. You. The results are conclusive, I interrupted. Marcus isn't your biological son. Gasps echoed around the room. Damon looked like I'd slapped him. That's not possible. I handed him the paper. He took it with shaking hands and scanned it. Once, twice, then again, like the words might rearrange themselves if he blinked enough. And then, quietly, no match. Indy lunged forward. She's lying. This is some mistake, some lab mix-up. I reached into the envelope again and pulled out the photo. This is Connor Walsh, software engineer, Portland, your ex. Indy's face turned white. Damon stared at the photo, then at Marcus, then back again. No, he whispered, you said Marcus was premature. Indy was shaking now. He was, Damon. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't know how to tell you. So you did know, he said, his voice hollow. Patricia stood. Is this true? Indy buried her face in her hands. Yes, she sobbed. But he's yours in every way that matters. You've raised him. Except he's not mine, Damon snapped. You let me believe. I needed a stable life. Indy choked. Connor didn't want kids. He didn't. That's a lie. I cut in. Connor's been looking for you. For him. For over a year. The room imploded. Patricia started crying. Richard looked like someone had just told him the stock market had crashed. Melody sat frozen, clutching a napkin like it was a lifeline. But Damon looked broken. He turned to Indy. I gave you everything. I know, she whispered. I'm sorry. Then, without looking back, he handed me Marcus. I need air, he said, walking out the front door. Indy collapsed onto the couch. And me, I held the little boy, who had no idea what storm had just blown through his perfect little party. I kissed the top of his head and whispered, It's okay, baby. The truth hurts, but it's always better than the lie. The silence after Damon walked out was the loudest thing in the room. No one moved. No one breathed. Indy sat frozen on the couch, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Patricia clutched a glass of untouched wine, her hands trembling. Even Richard, the walking embodiment of self-assurance, looked like he'd aged 10 years in the span of 10 minutes. I stood there, still holding Marcus. He had no idea what had just happened. No idea that his mother's lies had shattered the illusion of a family around him. He just nestled into my shoulder, soft and warm, humming some baby nonsense like the world was still whole. Indy finally stood. You had no right, she hissed, stepping toward me. This was between me and Damon. You destroyed everything. I met her eyes. No, you did that. The day you lied to my son and kept lying for over a year. The day you sat me next to a trash can and laughed like it was some harmless joke. You made this bed, Indy, and now you're drowning in it. She opened her mouth to say something, but whatever it was caught in her throat. You should leave, Patricia said suddenly. Her voice was weak but firm. Indy turned, stunned. What? You heard me, her mother said. I don't know who you are anymore, and I won't sit here and pretend this is normal. You made a fool of all of us. Richard stood and nodded solemnly. We raised you better than this. I did it for love, Indy whispered. No, sweetheart. I said you did it for control. Indy's shoulders slumped, and for the first time she looked small, powerless, and entirely human. She walked toward me, slowly, and reached for Marcus. But I pulled back. No, I said, not until Damon decides what happens next. He's the one who's been betrayed. You're not his mother, she spat. No, I said softly, but I'm the only one in this room who has always told him the truth. She didn't fight me after that. She just collapsed back into the couch, defeated. Richard and Patricia quietly collected their things. Melody didn't say a word, just stared at Indy like she was seeing a stranger. I stayed a little longer, until Damon returned. It was close to dusk, and he came in through the back patio door, his shirt wrinkled, hair tousled, eyes red but dry. He looked at me, then Marcus, then back at me. "I don't know what to do," he said. I nodded. "You don't have to know right now, but you do need time and space." He reached out and gently took Marcus from my arms. The little one cooed and nestled against his chest. He's still my son, in a way," Damon whispered. "Even if—" "It's not about biology," I said. "It's about honesty, trust. You can still be part of his life if that's what you want. But on your terms now." He nodded slowly, cradling the boy like he was made of glass. "I think I need to call Connor." I blinked. "You... what?" "If he's Marcus's father, he deserves to know," Damon said. "I won't be part of another lie. And maybe it's not just about what I lost. Maybe it's about what Marcus still has a chance to gain." My chest swelled with pride. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man, one who had been tricked and manipulated. Yes, but one who would never let bitterness rot his heart. Later that night, Damon texted me. "Staying at a hotel. Took Marcus with me. I need time." I replied, "Proud of you." 3 days passed. Indy didn't call me, which was probably wise. I heard from Melody that she was staying at a friend's house and figuring things out. By Friday, Connor had flown in. Damon arranged a quiet meeting in a neutral place, a public park with shaded benches and enough distance from the house to avoid drama. Margaret came, too, just to make sure everything stayed calm. She sat a few yards away with a newspaper she never actually read. I watched from a bench across the path. Connor was tall, wearing a simple grey t-shirt and jeans. He looked like someone who had carried guilt on his back for a long time. Damon approached, holding Marcus, who squirmed in his arms. "Is that him?" Connor asked, eyes filling with something I couldn't quite name. "Yes," Damon said quietly. "His name's Marcus." Connor knelt to eye level and smiled. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. Marcus blinked, then laughed, reaching for the stranger's necklace. I watched as Damon handed Marcus to Connor, and I swear, something passed between them, not just a physical exchange, but something ancestral, recognition. "I'm not here to take him," Connor said quickly. "I just needed to see him, know him. If you'll let me." Damon nodded. "We'll figure it out, together." And that was it. No shouting, no courts, just 2 men, 1 child, and the slow beginning of something real. Later that week, Damon began divorce proceedings. He wasn't angry, just firm, focused. "I can't raise a child on lies," he told Indy. "I loved you. I would have done anything for you, but you used that love to rewrite reality. I won't be part of that anymore." Indy cried, begged, pleaded. But Damon didn't budge. "I forgive you," he said, "but I don't trust you, and I won't pretend we can come back from this." And just like that, the house of cards she built came tumbling down. The woman who thought she could engineer a perfect life, sculpt her world with manipulation and half-truths, found herself alone. And me, I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I simply lived. Because in the end, the truth always finds its way to the surface. Even if it takes a trash can to start the journey. Weeks passed. It's strange, really, how quickly the extraordinary folds back into the ordinary. One day, you're uncovering DNA tests and confronting betrayal in front of a room full of pearl-clad strangers. And the next, you're loading the dishwasher, wondering if you should try that new herbal tea Cheryl keeps raving about. But even in the silence, the echoes remained. Damon and Marcus stayed in a temporary apartment on the other side of town. He called often sometimes to ask for parenting tips, other times just to hear a voice that didn't carry the weight of lies. He never once asked for advice about Indy. He'd made up his mind. I visited every few days, always welcomed by the sound of toddler footsteps and Damon's tired but grateful smile. Marcus had grown attached to me in a way I never expected. He'd squeal when he saw me, throw his pudgy arms up in the air, and babble gran-na before running into my legs. I would kneel and scoop him into my arms every time. He wasn't my biological grandson, but he was mine in every way that mattered. Love doesn't come with a blood type. Indy had moved back in with her parents in Denver. According to Melody, she sent Damon one long email filled with apologies, explanations, poetic regrets. He read it, sighed, and hit archive. There's nothing left to salvage, he told me, but I hope she figures herself out, for Marcus's sake. He wasn't bitter. He was resolute, and I respected that more than he'll ever know. Connor stayed in town longer than anyone expected. He got an Airbnb nearby and started joining us for casual outings, trips to the park, library story time, baby yoga, which, let me tell you, is both ridiculous and adorable. He never pushed, never claimed a title, just showed up, consistently, kindly. One afternoon, while Marcus napped in his stroller and we sat on a park bench watching squirrels argue over a sandwich crust, Connor turned to me. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." I shrugged. "You're the one who showed up. That counts for a lot in this world." He looked down, thoughtful. I was angry. For a long time. I kept thinking, why would she lie? Why would she leave? But now, I think she didn't believe she could have a good life with me. I wasn't shiny enough, safe enough. She was chasing safety, not truth, I said. "Yeah," he smiled, "but truth always catches up." I nodded, watching the light flicker through the trees. "Do you think he'll ever call me Dad?" he asked softly. I thought about it. He might, someday, but what matters is that you're here to earn it, not demand it. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see it in his eyes, the weight he carried, and the hope he dared not name. "You're good with him," I added, "better than I think you realise." He chuckled. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "None of us do," I said. "We just keep showing up." Later that evening, Damon called with news. "Connor wants to move here," he said. "He's found a job, remote work. Nothing huge, but stable." I smiled. "That's wonderful." He's also asked if he can start a parenting plan. Not legally, just informally, co-parenting. And I said yes. I sat back in my chair, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. "You're doing the right thing." "I think so too." Then he paused. "Mum." "Yes." "You're the reason all of this is okay." I blinked. "You could have stayed silent, could have buried it all, but you didn't. You stood up when no one else could see clearly, even me." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I did what any mother would do. "No," he said, "you did what a good mother would do." That night, I finally pulled the old box out from my closet. The one marked Damon age 0 to 10. Inside were scribbled drawings, crayon portraits of robots, a melted birthday candle shaped like the number 5, and a photo of him in 2nd grade, missing 2 front teeth and holding a plastic trophy. I added a new photo to the top, Marcus, sitting on Damon's lap, laughing in the sunlight. The truth had changed our family. It had burned down the old walls, but in its place, something real had started to grow. A few days later, Damon called again. "We're thinking of throwing a small gathering," he said. "Just family. Nothing formal. We want to celebrate Marcus's 2nd birthday. Not a party, just a picnic at the park. Would you come?" "Of course. And maybe we can start over. You know, not erase anything, just begin again on different terms." I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. When I arrived at the picnic, Damon was setting up balloons, Connor was laying out sandwiches, and Marcus was trying to stuff an entire blueberry muffin into his mouth. Damon walked over and handed me a little envelope. "What's this?" I asked. He looked sheepish. "Just open it." Inside was a hand-drawn card, Marcus's fingerprints smeared into the shape of a heart. Below it, in Damon's handwriting, "Thank you for being the only one who never lied." The tears came quickly, and this time I didn't fight them. That afternoon, we sat under the trees, eating sandwiches and watching Marcus run between us. There was no bitterness, no tension, just the hum of real life returning. And as the sun dipped low, casting long golden shadows across the grass, I realised this was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming something that should never have been stolen in the first place. Respect, love, truth. I didn't need a perfect family. I just needed an honest one. 3 months later, I stood in the back of the same church where Damon and Indy had once said their vows, now repurposed for something entirely different. This time, there was no white dress, no flower petals lining the aisle, no guests pretending everything was fine. This time, it was a custody hearing. To everyone's surprise, Indy had returned. She'd flown in unannounced, served Damon with a formal petition for shared custody, and tried to paint herself as a mother wrongfully cut out of her child's life. According to her lawyer, she'd experienced significant personal growth and therapy and was ready to re-establish maternal rights. Damon was stunned. Connor was furious. And me, I was just tired. Tired of women like Indy thinking they could control the truth with well-placed tears and expensive attorneys. Tired of watching Damon relive betrayal every time her name came up. Tired of Marcus being reduced to a pawn. So, when Damon asked if I would testify if I'd be willing to speak in court as a character witness, I didn't hesitate. And there I was, wearing a navy blouse and holding my breath as the judge called my name. I walked to the witness stand slowly, deliberately. My heels echoed across the hardwood floor like punctuation marks. Each click said, "I am here. I am not afraid. Please state your name for the record. Rhonda Mitchell. And your relation to the parties involved. I'm Damon's mother, and Marcus's grandmother in every way that matters." The opposing attorney was quick to pounce. "Ms. Mitchell, would you say you have an objective view of the situation?" "I'd say I have a clear one." She arched an eyebrow. "Didn't you have Marcus's DNA tested without consent?" "Yes," I replied, because I was the only person in that child's life who suspected something was wrong, and I was right. A ripple moved through the courtroom. She pressed on. "Would you agree that your actions were invasive, possibly even traumatic for the family dynamic?" I leaned forward slightly. "What's traumatic," I said, voice steady, "is watching your son build his life on a lie. What's invasive is finding out your daughter-in-law used your child as cover for her infidelity. What's damaging is asking a man to raise a son that isn't his and never telling him the truth." The attorney hesitated. "I did what was necessary," I finished, and I'd do it again. Damon's lawyer smiled slightly. I could tell he was holding back a cheer. After court adjourned that day, I sat outside on a bench with Damon and Connor. The air was thick with exhaustion, but there was hope in it too. "Do you think the judge believed her?" Damon asked, eyes scanning the concrete. "I think," I said carefully, "the judge saw the real Indy today, and that's all we needed." Indy had cried on the stand, told stories of loneliness and regret, painted herself as a victim of postpartum confusion and fear. But what the judge saw, and more importantly, what she heard, was a woman who abandoned her child, then returned only when her control slipped away. A week later, the decision came in full legal custody to Damon, with limited supervised visitation for Indy until further psychological evaluations could be completed. It wasn't just a win, it was justice. That night, Damon came over with Marcus asleep in his car seat. He brought pizza, a bottle of wine, and the look of a man finally breathing freely again. "She's not going away forever," he said, "but at least now, the rules are different." "You set the rules now," I reminded him, "and that changes everything." As we sipped wine and listened to Marcus snore softly from the corner, Damon looked at me across the table. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "The chair." I blinked. "What chair?" "At the wedding," he said. "That folding chair beside the trash. You sat there the whole time. Mum." I remember looking over and I was so wrapped up in Indy's world, I didn't see how wrong that was. He exhaled. "I'm sorry." "You've already said that," I replied. "I know, but I needed to say it again." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You were in love. You trusted her. There's no shame in that." He nodded slowly. "Still, if I could go back." "You can't." I said, "None of us can, but we can choose better going forward. And you've done that, Damon, again and again." He smiled. "Tired but genuine, thanks, Mum." I watched him carry Marcus to the car that night, watched the way he strapped him in, kissed his forehead, then turned back to wave at me through the window. I thought about how far we'd come, from that awful day at the wedding to this, from humiliation to healing, from silence to strength. And in that moment, I realised something I hadn't before. Sometimes, justice doesn't come in grand courtroom speeches or fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt, in the peaceful sleep of a child who is finally safe, in the unwavering presence of those who choose truth over comfort. Indy had wanted to control the narrative, to shape her life with lies and polish. But what she didn't count on, what she never understood, was that real family isn't built on image. It's built on showing up, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And now, that's exactly what we were doing. Together. 2 years later, on a bright spring morning filled with the hum of bees and the smell of fresh-cut grass, I stood in my backyard, arranging cupcakes on a picnic table. The occasion Marcus's 4th birthday. He wanted a dinosaur theme this year, but only the nice ones. He had specified with a very serious face, so we had plush triceratops, green balloons, and a cake shaped like a smiling stegosaurus. It wasn't the kind of party Indy would have thrown, with photographers and hand-lettered signs and custom gift bags, but it was the kind that mattered. Simple, honest, filled with people who truly loved him. Connor arrived first, carrying a handmade paper-mache volcano and looking more nervous than he needed to be. He made it with me. He said, setting it down like it was a sacred artifact. It even erupts. I laughed. Does it involve baking soda? And vinegar, plus red glitter for lava. Perfect. Damon followed not long after, holding Marcus in one arm and a dinosaur hat in the other. My grandson's smile stretched wide when he saw me. "Grandna," he shouted, racing toward me. I knelt and opened my arms, catching him mid-sprint. "Happy birthday, sweet boy." He squeezed me tightly. "Did you see my volcano?" "I heard it erupts. We might need fire insurance." Damon hugged me next. "Thanks for doing this, Mum." "Thanks for letting me," I said softly. The guests trickled in. Cheryl brought devilled eggs. Margaret, bless her heart, came with a stack of wrapped books and a bottle of lemonade. Even Melody came, surprising all of us. She'd stayed distant after the hearing, but recently reached out to Damon, wanting to rebuild bridges. She and Connor spent most of the afternoon chatting near the grill, awkward at first, but slowly settling into something warmer. Indy wasn't there. The last we'd heard, she'd relocated to Colorado permanently. Damon kept her updated on Marcus with occasional emails, mostly pictures and milestones. She was no longer part of our story, but she was part of our history. And history, I'd come to realize, doesn't need to be rewritten, just understood. Later that afternoon, while Marcus was busy digging up plastic fossils in the sandbox, Damon and I sat together on the patio with glasses of iced tea. "He's so happy," Damon said, watching his son giggle in the sun. "He's loved," I replied. "That's all children really need." He paused, swirling the ice in his glass. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, about that day at the wedding, about how far we've come." I glanced at him. "You've come farther than you think." He looked at me, emotion flickering behind his eyes. "You saved me." "No," I said. "I reminded you who you are, and then you saved yourself." We sat in silence for a while, letting the breeze speak between us. Then Damon reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. "I was going to wait until later, but I want you to have this now." I raised an eyebrow. "It's not my birthday." "Doesn't matter." I opened the box slowly, and inside was a silver necklace with a delicate pendant, a single folding chair, engraved in miniature. Next to it, a tiny trash can, and hanging from both, a heart. I stared at it, stunned. Tears welled up instantly. "Damon," he smiled, "you sat there for me when no one else did, and you turned that humiliation into strength. You taught me that love doesn't mean silence. It means standing up, even when it's messy, especially when it's messy." I reached across the table and held his hand. "You have no idea what this means to me." "I think I do." I wore that necklace every day after, not as a symbol of pain, but as a reminder of what came from it. Love, truth, a real family. Marcus eventually ran over and climbed into my lap, covered in frosting and dirt. "Grandna," I found the biggest dino bone, he declared, holding up a plastic rib like it was a priceless treasure. "You're a regular paleontologist," I said, brushing crumbs from his cheek. He leaned against me, warm and soft and completely unaware of how close he came to living a lie. "And that's the point, isn't it? We fight not for revenge, not for justice, but for the quiet dignity of knowing that the people we love are safe, free, whole." I looked around at my family, Connor laughing with Margaret, Damon setting up the next game, Marcus dozing in my arms. And I thought back to that wedding day, to the folding chair by the trash can, to the way Indy had smiled as she humiliated me. She thought she'd won. But here, in my backyard, with frosting on my shirt and love in every corner. This was the victory. The kind no camera could capture, the kind no lie could erase, the kind you earn by simply never giving up. The truth had always been my seat at the table, and now it was a throne.